Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I am very happy to be joined today by Nancy Ney. Nancy, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. This is great. I love it.
Yeah, we're super excited to hear you. Nancy is going to be talking about the art of travel photography, capturing life in the moment. So Nancy's going to take us on a little trip through some of the places she has been. Really excited to share with you her work. I've seen a bunch of it, and if you haven't checked it out yet, please make sure you do. It's absolutely beautiful, and there's a ton of stuff to see. So as you know, if you're joining us here on Zoom, you can drop any questions you may have for Nancy in the Q&A link. For live stream Facebook, you can drop any questions you may have in the comment section. We're going to hold all the questions till the end so Nancy can get through everything, but at the end, we will definitely take any questions or comments that we may have. Otherwise, Nancy, thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. I am so excited to be doing this talk for B&H. I have been going to that store since back in the day when they were on 17th Street and used to write the sales in a chalkboard over the cash register. So it's really exciting to be here now. I thought it would be cool to talk about how I started off in photography. I started my career in New York City, but before that, I was at American University, and it was my senior year, and I was a psych major. And I decided to take a photography elective. Just by chance, I signed up for it. And basically, I was literally obsessed right away with photography. I decided not to go to graduate school and to pursue a career in photography. So when I went back to New York City, I tried to get a job as an assistant. But at that time, no one was hiring women as assistants. So I got a job at a production company producing TV commercials. And I spent a lot of my time taking pictures on the set and working in the darkroom, developing film, and giving it to the clients so that they could have photos with the directors and the producers. One of my favorite things to do was to photograph rock concerts in those days. Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Lou Reed, Rod Stewart, Wings, Fleetwood Mac. I just would shoot them, go back, develop, print the pictures, and I was just totally obsessed. If you're interested in this particular type of photography and want to see these rock stars, you could look at my site under Classic Rock. I used a Nikon back then with a 200 millimeter lens, no autofocus, and Tri-X film, which I pushed to about 800 or 1200 sometimes. It was a very intense time for me, and I was totally obsessed with the magical qualities of photography. I'd spend hours developing and printing my pictures. And you notice I've used the word obsessed a lot. That's because photography was never just a job for me. It was a passion and something that's kept me motivated all these years. So I worked as a freelance fashion photographer in New York and learned my craft by trial and error. I put a portfolio together, testing with Ford and Wilhelmina models, and tried to get work. My portfolio was mainly fashion. This actual shot was a test. And I later brought it up to Hampton's magazine, and they put it on the cover. I had a studio first on Union Square, and then I bought one on the corner of Broadway and Houston, where my family and I lived and I worked till I sold it in 2012. You might remember this ad. It appeared in the back covers of many magazines like Gourmet and the New York Times magazine. I searched and searched for the perfect fortune teller and finally found this woman on 6th Avenue in a flea market. And at first she wouldn't do it, but then I offered her $50 and she said yes. But the crazy thing about this ad is that although it won many, many awards that year, even the Clio, it was pulled after 2 years because the Colombians were offended by the word mule when it says, "I see a man and a mule in your future," because it was a term used by the drug cartels. So that was pretty crazy. This was part of an ad campaign I did for No Nonsense Pantyhose. And the idea was, whose legs are these anyway? And it was a group of celebrities that we just photographed their legs. And I went all over the country to photograph these people. Chris Everett, Lisa Gibbons, Susan Lucci, Rita Moreno, a couple of country and western stars. They were all great, but Rita Moreno was really, really the best. And she was shot in my studio, just doing endless kicks just to get the perfect leg height. She was great. My whole career, I used Nikons, but recently I've switched to the Sony mirrorless cameras, and I really love them. This is just an example of what advertising looked like in the 80s. And the art director was Kurt Wise with the George Lois Agency. My career was long and really varied. I did every kind of photography, even still life occasionally. I liked the challenge of doing assignments and working with the team. Most of it was shooting film. I did a lot of shoots for stock and just for my portfolio. This was a test with a model who was one of my daughter's best friends at the UN school. And later the client bought it. But what's interesting is she's now a director, writer, and producer for HBO. And these were a lot of fun, and we got a lot of laughs on the set over this. The makeup artists and stylists were really amazing. And it was a huge change for me to sell my loft after so many years working as a commercial photographer in Manhattan. But I've never regretted it, and it's opened a whole new chapter in my life. So after I moved to Miami, I started traveling and photographing. As Steve McCurry said, my camera is my passport. And I found I was so inspired by the people that I met that it really encouraged me and motivated me to really keep looking and looking for better photographs. What I enjoyed most was going where I'd never been before. It really turned me on. I started showing my work in local art fairs, and I loved discussing my pictures with people who came into my booth. And if they bought something, I was totally overjoyed. The thought of people hanging my art in their homes is something that's still keeping me motivated to this day. This was my last trip before the pandemic. It's the Golden Temple in Amritsar, India. I returned from there on February 10th, 2020. And it's been a really long time since I've done a big trip like this. A lot of trips have been canceled, and I'm hoping someday that they'll start up again. There are no religious boundaries at the Golden Temple. Everyone, no matter who or what they worship, is welcome. This is a perfect example of the rule of thirds. Here, not only is she looking into the negative space, but the horizon line is 2/3 up. And it makes for a much more interesting composition than if everything was centered in the middle. The Golden Temple represents the unique identity and heritage of the Sikhs, their generosity and kindness. Enormous kitchens prepare food with volunteers doing all the work. No one who comes to the temple goes hungry. Over 60,000 meals, pretty amazing, are served daily. Whoever wants them, they sit in big rooms and eat. Bathing becomes a holy experience, as it is in most of India. The pool surrounding the Golden Temple is called the Amrit Sarovar, which is considered sacred by religious pilgrims. Before offering their prayers, they bathe in the holy water. At the Golden Temple, I arrived usually at 6 a.m. or 5 p.m. The golden hour is only 40 minutes, and in the morning, the sunrise seems to go really quickly before the light gets harsh. Just to give a feel for what I did, and it does work pretty well, is I just waited in this spot and a lot of interesting people came by. I can't show them all, but it was difficult to choose which to put in. And then we had these guys who were ready to bathe before they prayed. So portraits and shooting people are what I love to do most. The key to photography is your passion. Whether there are trees, water, sunsets, you have to think about what you want to see and what is your point of view. This was at the Turkana Festival, which is a festival that is a 3-day celebration that promotes tribal unity. These are two of the tribes, the Samburu and the Turkana. We were very lucky to get them on this bluff overlooking the lake for a sunset shoot. Faces really draw me in, and I love connecting with people. This young woman was in her tent at the Turkana Festival. I asked her to come closer to the opening, and she was very, very pleased to do so. And I began photographing her with the light perfect on her face as the background fell into darkness. I love the vibrance of her scarf and the intensity of her gaze. This is one of my favorite portraits from my trip to Kenya. When you're making a portrait, it's essential to get the focus right on the eyes. As you can see here, mostly everything went out except for her eyes, and it works. The Taj Mahal in Agra, India. It's an interesting story, and there's a famous quote from the photographer Versailles. Chance is always there. We all use it. All good photographers meet chance all the time. This photo was a result of chance. I was at the Taj very early in the morning, and around 6:30, after waiting online, a guide grabs you and takes you around and says, "Look, madam, no people. Look, madam, no people." And it's all beautiful, but very typical scenes. So I saw these two women. They were dressed exactly alike. And I went over and left the guide, went over and asked if they would pose for me. And they did. And I think I got a very unique photograph, which I really love, which was pure chance to see them there. And I still can't believe they had the same dresses on. Another example of chance, I was at it was early morning at the Pushkar Camel Fair, which is one of India's largest camel, horse, and cattle fairs, and located in eastern Rajasthan. And I saw this woman, a gypsy, and she was working on something next to this red background. And I couldn't believe my luck. I asked her to pose for me, and we did a number of shots with this background, and I couldn't believe it. It was really, really great. So I think it's helpful that I came from a fashion and advertising background, because it helps me to ask people to pose and ask them if they mind being photographed, putting them in a situation. So you just have to practice doing that. Also at the Pushkar Camel Fair, a sadhu or holy man. And on the right, a camel trader. 80% of my travel photographs are of people. Most people have been very kind and willing to pose. And the sadhu did me a great favor by pulling on his beard just at the right moment. For this shot, I was cruising around the camel fair with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And I saw this guy about 20 feet away. He looked really fierce and unfriendly, but when I raised my camera, he really cooperated and he kept blowing more and more smoke. So I was able to get a really great shot of him, and the camel totally cooperated. Zooming in one part of a scene usually works really, really well. Shooting with a long lens, putting the camera on aperture priority, and keeping the aperture as low as it can go is a great recipe for a portrait that stands out from the background. I love the painterly quality of this photograph. The camel fair was extremely dusty, and I felt like we spent 3 days coughing. But the smoke really, really worked for the shots, and it was well worth it. And here again, it's a long lens, letting the background get a little out of focus. You don't want to lose the camels entirely. And I was fortunate that they were wearing white. Namibia is a country right above South Africa. I traveled there in June of 2019. This woman is from a tribe called the Himba, who live in one of the most extreme environments on earth, the deserts that border Namibia and Angola. Water is scarce, and they use a paste mixture on both their bodies and hair for cleanliness. These pastes are made from the Oza Mumba scrub, mixed with animal fat and ground red pigmented stone. This Ojiti paste gives the women's skin and hair a red glow. It also works as sunblock, which keeps the skin moist and clean. Women who have been married for about a year or who have a child wear an ornate headpiece called an arembe, sculpted from sheep or goat skin. In the Himba community, hairstyles mean a lot. They reflect marital status, age, wealth, and rank. They create braids that could be compared to our hair extensions, but theirs are made from woven hay and goat hair. If you can see light, you absolutely have the key to photography. People always wonder about the Himba's bathing habits. Of course, there are no showers in the villages. And since traditionally the women were not allowed to use water for washing or cleaning themselves, they apply the red ochre to their skin and take a daily smoke bath for their cleanliness. I spent a lot of time with them in their huts, and they did not smell. Another quote I love comes from Edward Steichen. A portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it. Unmarried Himba men wear their hair in this tight single braid, and after they're married, they keep their heads covered. The Himbas practice polygamy, with both men and women being allowed to have multiple partners. I made sure to get to this village very early in the morning to catch their cooking rituals. The Himba people love their porridge. Every morning and evening, they heat some water, wait till it boils, throw in some flour, add oil. The food is ready. The flour is mostly from maize or sometimes millet. This was another lucky accident. I was photographing the woman on the left from the front when she started to walk away. And I just clicked off a few shots. And later I realized that the baby was looking right at me and he's not being held on by anything. There's no strapping. He's just sitting there. Both images are of San women. For the one on the right, we actually had a black backdrop that we brought with us and set up lights, really almost like a pro photo shoot with umbrellas, and that's how we captured that. We had a lot of tribal people sit for it. The San people are descendants of the first Homo sapiens. They have arguably the oldest gene pattern of all other nationalities. And they say that we're all descended from them. Here is a son, mother, and child in the doorway of their tent. Same thing, I pulled them close to the doorway to catch the light, and the rest of the picture went dark. The San village is referred to as a living museum. Historically, the San were hunter-gatherers. Women are considered equals, and decisions are made as a group. Today, there are about 100,000 San living in South Africa. I was supposed to shoot outside this Maasai village, but it was raining, and I was really disappointed. But the Maasai invited me into their huts, and I was able to get this picture by bouncing a flash off the ceiling of the hut. The piercing and stretching of earlobes among the Maasai is very common. They use twigs to pierce and stretch their lobes. The Maasai tradition of jumping is a way for a young man who has just become a warrior to show his strength and attract a bride. And these dances were really cool and great to photograph. I really love the jewelry and makeup on this Maasai woman. Converting some of the photos to black and white is a great option as well. I thought this worked really well. He's very fierce. I try to see the light and imagine how the image will look as a print. The most important part of photography is light. The backlight and her beautiful gesture make this photo. If I had shot it straight on or from the other side, it would not be as interesting. I've talked about the Himba tribe, but in Namibia, we also went to the Etosha National Park on safari. This was a great day because there was a drought. And when we went to this watering hole, about 85 elephants came to the watering hole while we were there. And that's why the dust is so intense. Elephants spend about 3/4 of their lives eating. They eat between 200 to 400 pounds of vegetation a day. They can really strip a forest. This was before the elephants showed up. And of course, the stiller the water, the better the reflection. At another park in the same area, we actually stayed at these cabins that were right next to the watering hole. And it was really great because we could run out, see what the animals were doing. And if it looked great, we'd photograph it. I mean, we were literally like 2 minutes from the watering hole. It was super convenient. I never knew giraffes drank this way. And the pattern the giraffes make in the water make this shot really, really unique. We also, at the same watering hole, saw this rhino come out. They shine large fluorescent lights, or maybe I think they're tungsten lights, on the watering hole at night. So, but this was done at a fifth of a second on a tripod with the ISO 800. I don't like to pull the ISO up too high because I sell a lot of photographs on metal and I make them very, very big. And if you make the ISO too high, the picture will break up. In this shot, I was in Kenya and my tent was on a waterway where these hippos were hanging out. And we could hear them groaning all night long. It was pretty funny. But one afternoon, they went into a frenzy all over the place. And luckily, we were there on a break between safaris and was able to get this shot with my 70 to 200. This was by far the most interesting and best sighting I had of all the safaris I've been on. This was very, very early in the morning at Amboseli State Park in Kenya. And the guides really knew where to take us. We got there and at first the cheetahs were just hanging out on the shore. But then all of a sudden they started coming at us and leaping through the water. It was so exciting. And we got a number of shots. I'm not going to show them all to you, but I really like this one a lot too, because the others had passed me by and I was able to get this guy. This lion is one of my favorites. We were out with the Jeep in the Mara in Kenya, and we saw a lion couple. And then we saw this lion following the couple. So he was hanging around hoping that he could, get in there too if the other male lion left. But that didn't happen. But his face was so soulful, and he's obviously been in a lot of fights. So I really, really love him. And then here's the couple right after. I didn't show the whole picture. The same night, actually, right late in the day, we saw this mother and baby running home in the Mara. On these safaris, they give you sandbags to put over the windshields, the window shields of the Jeeps, so that you can rest your camera on them and you don't have to use a tripod to eliminate camera shake. In advertising, I worked with so many art directors, but as a travel photographer, you have to be your own art director and your own editor. A friend of mine saw this and pulled me over to show me this woman as we were waiting, I think, for our ride back to the hotel. And it was just extraordinary. She was framed in this amazing way, offering us water. Of course, we could never drink it, but we did give her some money, and we all got a great shot out of it. This man was shot in Varanasi on the street. I noticed him in a corner, and he was definitely one of a kind. So never stop looking wherever you are. Everywhere there are great photographs. We were on a boat cruising up the Ganges in Varanasi. The Ganges River is one of the most revered waterways in the world, and also one of the most polluted. It provides water for nearly 500 million people. It runs from the foothills of the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal. It's the most sacred water in the Hindu tradition. It's understood to be the personification of the goddess Ganga. And that's an interesting fact, because you see all these people bathing in the water and you're like, I know that they want to do it for a spiritual reason, but what is it? And here you can see that they just want to get close to the goddess. They believe that bathing in the river provides forgiveness of sins and helps to attain salvation. This was in another town in northern Rajasthan called Koliyat. There's an annual fair held there in October, and during the full moon, thousands of pilgrims come to bathe in the Kapil Sarovar Lake. They believe the lake has the power to wash away their sins. People would be lining up to bathe in this water, and it was very dirty water, I have to say. Also in Koliyat, groups of people there were so many people there, it was very, very crowded, and groups of people would be begging me to photograph them. Families would come up to me. So it was really cool. And I'll finish, and then in this photo, I really love this because of the memory. I was walking up a hill inside the Jaisalmer Fort in Rajasthan. There were one-room homes as you walked up the path. And I looked inside and saw this beautiful room, and the woman beckoned for me to come in and offered to make me chai tea, which they have all over India in the streets. You can drink it, and we did. But here I was just a little worried because it was her own, where did she get her water from? But anyway, we took a bunch of photographs. I did drink the tea with her. And I was sad because she never unveiled her face. I never got to see her, but I also didn't get sick. Indians shave their children's heads at the age of 4, and they believe it teaches humbleness and devotion. They say offering your hair to God is a symbolic gesture of surrendering your ego and giving thanks for your blessings. Children with shaved heads are viewed as innocent and holy and are treated with respect. I took this photo in Madurai in southern India in the very historic temple, Meenakshi, where they worship Parvati and Shiva. Again, at the Turkana Festival, this is one of my favorite portraits also. I love the light on her face, and there was a little bit of a skylight as well as a side light. And just the look on her face, her humbleness is beautiful. I did go to Ethiopia to photograph the Omo tribes, and they are geniuses at face and body painting. They paint their faces with a tip of a nail or a piece of wood, a reed, or a crushed stem. This iconic woman, yes, she's a woman, attracts the most attention at the art show. And she's from the Kara tribe in the Omo Valley. 2 girls who I photographed from the front, which I'm not going to show, but I really love this back shot as well. You can see their huts in the background. These girls are hopefully the sisters of these babies, but it's a very joyful shot and I really like it. Don't know if they're the mothers or the sisters. The African children are so beautiful. They really make for great subjects. Sometimes I think of a shoot as a series of sketches. You are trying different things, and in the case of shooting a person, different emotions, angles, whatever you can do. And later, you look at your shots and you say, yeah, that's the one. And usually, and many times, it's the first picture you've taken. You just have to keep searching for those special moments that will elevate your photographs. Like this one. I visited Oaxaca, Mexico for El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. It's observed from October 31st to November 2nd. It's observed by family members to celebrate their loved ones who have died, but they look at it as a day of celebration rather than mourning. The most common design is painting the face to resemble a skull. Skull face painting is a chance to overcome the fear of death and just celebrate life. During this time, they have many, many parades. And here I'm just running backwards, shooting with a long exposure and a flash. But the most amazing part of this holiday is the cemeteries. The people arrive with their families to celebrate the lives that were lived. They eat, play music, dance, drink, and the way they decorate the graves is so creative and beautiful. They even have contests in some cemeteries for the best grave decorations. In the end, I don't think there's a marigold left in the city. I really like this one for the solemn expression on the boys' faces and how they seem to care so much. It's really a very unique and poignant tradition. There were so many dance performances going on that week in Oaxaca. And I really like this image, which is made with a combination of flash and a long exposure. And it was really great to shoot from a balcony at this venue. It improved the images. In Nepal, which is primarily a Hindu country, even though it's the birthplace of the Buddha, you see men and women wearing a small dot on their foreheads between their eyebrows. The mark is known as a bindi, and it's a Hindu tradition that dates to the 3rd and 4th centuries. At the festival, people are selling the bindi powder. So when you're traveling, it's really cool to do some details and close-ups. This Hindu temple is dedicated to Shiva. And I basically stayed here for about 30 minutes on my knees, waiting for who would come out. And again, one amazing person after another showed up. Photographing the sadhus in Nepal in their temple. They were very kind to pose outside as well. In Nepal, I squeezed myself into a corner to be able to capture this. It was very, very hot. It was so tiny, the room. And it turned out to be one of my favorite shots from the trip. This is a monk in Bhutan in one of the monasteries. Again, I was walking upstairs looking to see what room I could get into. And he was in there. A mother and daughter in Paro in Bhutan. And this is also a mother and daughter outside the temple in Paro. A huge attraction of Bhutan is its focus on peacefulness and happiness. They have a lot of young monks there. And walking through the back streets of Paro, I wandered into a coffee shop and was able to see these little boys and get this shot, which I really like. He was there too. Kolkata is one of the most vibrant and exciting cities in India. I found myself there right before the pandemic broke out. While walking around the Kolkata flower market, I came across this family in their booth. They were selling flowers, and I did a bunch of photos of them, the grandmother, the mother, and the son. This beautiful woman was just walking, and I was able to grab this shot of her with a long lens. As the same, this is a bride who just got married, and she was ecstatic and thrilled. In the flower market, there are many, many people carrying these huge bundles on their heads. And here, what I did was I blacked out the background in Photoshop so that the flowers really stood out and his face. I love to walk around markets and look for small moments as well as the overall long shot. These were taken on February 8th, 2020. And I would really wonder what it looks like there now. Another great chance meeting. I was walking into the desert in Morocco and saw these two guys. They were so handsome. And I asked if I could do a photo shoot with them. They couldn't believe that I took so many pictures of them, really a lot. And they were very, very amused by me. I wanted to give them money, but they said no way. And they pulled out their knapsacks, and in there they had carved animals that I could buy. So I did. I bought them, and everyone was very, very happy. The thing about Morocco is that everyone there is opposed to being photographed. You just can't shoot them. They put up their hands over their faces, they yell at you, they throw things at you. But these men were Berbers, so they didn't mind. One of my favorite places in Morocco to shoot is Chefchaouen, which is a blue city, and it's notable for its many shades of blue. It was founded in 1471, but didn't get its distinctive color till 1492, when it received an influx of Jews escaping the Spanish Inquisition. They brought a tradition of painting the buildings blue. I thought that was an amazing fact when I first heard it. There are other theories on why the walls are blue. The blue is said to symbolize the sky and heaven and serve as a reminder to lead a spiritual life. This was early morning in Chefchaouen. I waited here for a couple of hours for the right person to walk through the alleyway. And finally, he did. You can't shoot the Moroccans and show their faces, so I was hoping for a great back shot. I love these shadows, which are a result of the early morning light. And here I did get her walking toward me, and the shadow was smaller because the light was later, a little later in the morning. But I kept far away so as not to offend her. So I've always really been interested in infrared, and throughout my career in New York, I loved it. But before digital, it was very complicated to deal with. The film had to be loaded and unloaded in complete darkness and kept at a certain temperature. So I never tried it. But now, in the last 4 years, I have totally fallen in love with it and use it all the time. Infrared photography is a look into the invisible world. Infrared waves are just below visible red light in the electromagnetic spectrum. I don't want to get too complex. The most striking effect is the Wood effect, named after the photographer Robert Wood, who is sort of like the founding father of infrared. This effect reflects light, giving off trees, giving them a bright look, and allows the skies to go dark. It produces surreal landscapes and high contrast black and white photography. But I also love it for portraits. This image always draws people into my booth. And people think that I made it in Photoshop and it's not real and what is it? And it's really funny. But the goats love the fruit of the argan trees in Morocco. They climb the trees and eat the fruit. And it has a little nut inside that passes through their digestive system. And when they poop it out onto the ground, women pick up these nuts, bring them back to their collectives, crack open the nut, and grind the seeds, which produces an oil called argan oil, which is the oil that so many women use in the States on their hair and face. These women are from the tribe in Turkana in Kenya. And I just love what the infrared does to their portrait. It adds a golden glow and makes their skin look really smooth. It gives a vintage feeling, especially to the tribes, the kind of clothing that they wear. I think it really adds to the photographs. Mystery, mood, and magic. That's what you got. A lot of times I'll be shooting infrared and I just look at the back of the camera and I'm like, ooh, that looks amazing. So there are a few ways you can convert your camera to IR. And if you go to lifepixel.com, this website will give you all the options for doing so. Just a quick chart to show you different conversions. Some people prefer color enhancing IR, which gives you bright pink or blue images and deep skies. My personal preference is the standard IR because of the authentic and monochromatic quality it adds to the photos. Here's a typical IR effect. And when I shot this picture, the rest of the group was watching a goat slaughter. So I didn't, was not interested. I grabbed this man and asked if he'd go for a walk with me. We didn't go far, and was able to capture this beautiful scene. And you see how the IR really deepens the clouds and makes them pop. And then the vegetation is like a light gray, and his skull cap looks like silk. It really takes you out of the literal world. You remove the filter that blocks infrared in the camera and add a filter that only allows infrared. And that's how companies convert your camera to infrared. These are the women from the Borana tribe in the Omo. And again, I think, with their traditional clothing, the IR really, really makes the shot, complements everything that they're wearing. Here they were singing and playing for us, and it was really wonderful. When you're shooting mirrorless, you can see the infrared effect in the viewfinder. And it's great for shooting silhouettes as well, because you can close down the lens and see how it's getting darker, or inversely, if you open it, lighter, and you actually see the true exposure. Just a couple portraits showing how they paint their faces in the Omo. When I'm working, I always carry two cameras. One is a traditional color camera and the other is converted to infrared. And I usually start shooting and rotate cameras to capture the scene both ways. If I'm shooting a person, I just ask them to wait, and I put down one camera and pick up another. This is a series I shot in Kerala in the backwaters. There's a network of lagoons and lakes, sometimes compared to the American bayou. And I was cruising through these waters on a gondola using a very small infrared camera. And I got these photographs, which seem to have resonated with people in my booth. I mean, I've sold these pictures many, many times. The images were originally monochromatic, but I put them into a program called Nick, which is you get through DxO, and you can access it through Photoshop. And you can tone the infrared any way you want. You can also do it with color photographs as well. Yeah, here you really see how the trees go so white, and then this picture is toned the same way. I really like the effect. This is the famous tree in Africa. It's called the acacia tree. And here the elephant and the birds, they really stand out with the sky going dark. It almost looks like I shot it with a strobe. This is one of my favorite images from my trip to the Palouse. And it's a schoolhouse being held up by a truck axle. I love the juxtaposition of the cloud and the building. And I call this image the Crooked House. Also in the Palouse, which is called one of the 7 wonders of Washington State. Its gentle rolling hills are covered by wheat fields. This was shot from 3,600 feet in a summit called Steptoe Butte. The hills look like giant sand dunes and were formed in much the same way. It's located on the border of Washington State and Idaho. And it's the 2nd largest wheat growing area in the world. Almost any place that night that we pointed our cameras was great. I was using a 100 to 400 millimeter lens with a 2-time converter, obviously, of course, on a tripod to get these photographs. This is a canola field also in the Palouse, shot right in the middle of the day. And I love this shot. The cows seem to be posing. I did not Photoshop this, but it was taken on our way back to the hotel from the road. We just were passing and stopped quickly. The Malecón is Cuba's most famous seaside avenue. It spans about 2 miles along the coast of Havana. It's a great place to people watch and see all the classic cars go whizzing by. The classic car thing is real in Cuba. It's not just for tourists. It's what they drive. They fix and refurbish all the motors and, keep the outer car forever. This picture was shot at dawn. Here's some traffic in Havana. You can see what all the cars are. I also traveled to Eastern Cuba, to Santiago de Cuba. You can see here he's wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. I put this into the NIC program as well under the analog setting to get a sort of antique feeling to the color. Cool guy in Havana. I really like this too. This woman in Camagüey, which is another city we went to in Eastern Cuba. The woman on the left is at least 98 years old, they told us, probably 102. I thought this shot was pretty cool, very funny that the parents have made this huge portrait of him. The Cuban people are great. They're very warm and loving. I feel terrible for what they're going through now. This was early morning in Camagüey. This was taken in a small town just outside of Havana, just wandering around trying to get inside some people's houses. And I did get in here and I really like it. And in Havana, a lot of people just leave their doors open. And I kind of spied in on her and took this. I don't know if she knew I was taking the picture. Che Guevara is everywhere in Cuba. His posters, his paintings, his portraits. He and Fidel Castro plaster all the buildings. And there's so much propaganda everywhere. The one on the left says, the best friend of Cuba. And under Che Guevara, it says, he lives. And this is a street at dawn in Santiago de Cuba. So I spend my summers on Fire Island. It's a barrier island, 35 miles long and a quarter mile wide. And it's off the southern coast of Long Island. The bay is on one side and the ocean on the other. And you have to take a 30-minute ferry ride to get there. There are no cars allowed on the island. And you ride bikes or you walk. This harvest moon was last year, September 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020. And it probably won't come back again till 2049, I was told. And here is the moon just rising, same night. I'm trying to speed it up. I really love this technique. Basically, you put the camera on the tripod, lower the ISO to 50 or 100, then close the lens down to 22. And this particular exposure was made at 2.5 seconds. The cloudy sky added a lot of drama. Same jetty, a different day, early in the morning at dawn. I was using a 16 to 35 millimeter lens, Sony lens. It's very light, so I could hand hold it at 1/10 of a second, and I got a sharp picture. Same here, same lens. And here I went a different day. I went back many, many days to see what I could get, and I got a lot of different angles and water patterns. It's always great to never settle for one photo. The more you shoot, the more you get. And this is what the ferry looks like. And I like this with the bird. These horses were photographed in Iceland, and there is an interesting backstory to them. They came with the first settlers in the year 874. The horses are Celtic and Norwegian, and they could survive the bitter cold. So special laws were created to protect the breed called Icelandic horses. And since the year 930, it has been forbidden to bring new horses to the island. And if a horse leaves, it can't come back. And the law is still in effect, and it protects the 50,000 horses that are currently living there. We went to a ranch called the Hideout, and it's a wonderful resort in Wyoming and they have 130 horses and wonderful wranglers who ride these horses. And 2 weeks out of the year, they allow photographers to do photo shoots there. Problem is, it was in January. And I've never been colder than on this particular time. It was 5 or 10 degrees. And sometimes you really couldn't even take your hand out, to hold the camera. It was so cold. So these were made at the foot of the Bighorn Mountains. This is one of my favorite shots from the trip. And I love the frost and the way the horses are all in one pattern, drinking, with one horse just looking up at me. One of the wonderful wranglers who was riding. This is at sunset. I converted it to black and white, obviously. This is a great example of rim light. She was also a wonderful rider. Infrared of the horses. Looks like a movie still. And finally, our lone sunset rider. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know how much time I took. Ooh, 6 o'clock.
It's okay, Nancy. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I tried to rush because I knew I had a lot.
No. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful photos. Like I said at the beginning, I mean, you just have such beautiful imagery, and you've been so many different places, and your career has spanned, quite vast. And to be able to share that with us, we really appreciate that. We do have some questions that came in, so I want to get to those questions. Definitely, like you said, like you have up here, if you want to check out Nancy, there's her information of where you can view more of her work, her Instagram, Facebook, website. So definitely check it out. There are some images. I know, Nancy, you talked about it, that there are some images that we weren't able to show that show a little bit more of the tribal aspect of that culture and stuff like that. But we're a family-friendly organization here, so we make sure to cater to everybody. But if you want to see some more of the tribal stuff and things like that, you can definitely check it out on her website. I know it's up there and to share. So jumping right into it, obviously the biggest question and the most asked question that we got so far, and I'm sure you've gotten this quite a bit yourself, is in terms of, and you mentioned it, giving money for photography and, offering people to pay them for photos and things like that. Is there a certain, percentage that you offer them? Do you always offer money for the photographs? Is it kind of, just on a basis if, you feel that they're looking for something? How do you approach that situation?
Well, it was interesting, a lot of different ways. In some of the tribal pictures in the Omo and in Kenya, the guide, who, by the way, is Piper McKay, brought the tribes food and all sorts of sundries that they needed. She dropped off sacks of things. I mean, we were told to bring pens. We gave them pens. most of the time you don't pay. You do not pay. For instance, all the pictures in India, I didn't pay anybody. I felt bad. The woman who was offering the water jug, I felt like since we weren't buying the water, we would pay her. But I don't even remember if we did pay her. But most of the people are not paid. I can't think of, except for those tribes. And I think in Namibia, our guide was Ben McCrae. And I think he also donated things to the tribes. So that's how it was taken care of.
Got it. So kind of following up on that a little bit, Jakai is asking, there's a lot of different cultures that obviously your photography has spanned. Do you find that any of the people oppose taking the photographs of themselves? Have you ever had to, deal with that? Is there a way to work around that, communicating with people what you're trying to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the main, mostly everyone wants to be photographed, except what I told you about Morocco. They will not. There's nothing you could do. The people in Morocco will not be photographed, except if they're Berbers, then it's okay. But they are adamantly against it. Every other country, especially India, they love it. I mean, the Indian people love being photographed, and they couldn't be kinder or more giving. If somebody doesn't want to, maybe you could take one shot and show them the back of the camera. We do that. I mean, people always ask me, do you send them the photographs, right? And you really can't. They don't have a way of receiving them, especially the tribal people. They don't have email. There's just no way to communicate with them again. If I were, I've seen other people like Jim Klein, who runs trips to Oaxaca, go back there and bring photographs, because he goes every single year and he takes people and he goes back to the same people and brings them prints. But that's super unusual. You could not do that in Africa. It would be impossible. It just wouldn't exist.
Yeah, definitely maybe not a lot of Wi-Fi out there.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
They're just so primitive. Their life is so, but showing them the back of the camera, they really get, they get thrilled by it and motivated. They really do. So that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah. So, when you are photographing these people, do you just kind of put them in the position you want to position them in? In other words, do you set up the shot the way you want it envisioned, or do you actually tell them and, maybe kind of motion through, gesturing and things like that, how you'd like them to be posed?
Yeah, it's both. A lot of times I do give them some guidance. I would tell them to look a certain way to get better lighting. Tell them not to smile. Tell them, sometimes I see a gesture like the woman holding up the shawl, and I'll ask her to repeat it because it looked amazing. But yes, I do direct a lot. Some people think that's wrong or whatever, but that's the way I do it. I mean, obviously some people, you just catch them. When I don't have a lot of grab photographs, I do a lot of asking. And again, if you don't speak the language, you have to, learn how to gesture and maybe even mimic posing that way yourself to show them how to do. I used to do that with models all the time. I'd say, do it like this, do it like that, so, kind of comes naturally to me. I mean, I've been doing this since 1980. I hate to say, a long time. Probably your audience wasn't born.
So we did get a lot of questions about the infrared stuff. First off, can you just remind anybody, some people were wondering if you could just repeat the website of where they can go to find out more information about that.
Sure. Life Pixel. So LIFEPIXEL.com.
Awesome.
They're wonderful people. They will explain everything. They're great. They do a great job. I didn't think it was very expensive. It's really good, but you have to dedicate a camera to it. You can't, I guess you could reverse it through them, but you can't really reverse it yourself.
So I guess in terms of the question that Joey was asking, he wanted to know if you've converted your whole entire camera to infrared versus using something like one of the removable IR filters or anything like that.
No, I converted 2 cameras to infrared. So I converted the camera. Mm-hmm.
There you go. Excellent. So Gary wants to know if you can spell sand people and where are they located in South Africa?
It's SAN. And that's a good question. They're somewhere near, okay. So what I would say is the San are located in Namibia. So it's really not, there may be some in South Africa, but we saw them in Namibia.
Okay.
So it's near, I think it's near Etosha where we were doing, the animal photography that I mentioned, somewhere near there.
Okay.
But it's very remote. It's super remote. You have to drive and drive. It's not easy to get to. You can't step off the plane and get there.
You've got to be a little committed to getting there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So going back to talking a little bit about, the posing of things, Elizabeth wanted to know, you mentioned that, you don't want them to smile. Mm-hmm. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, I just looking for a certain mood. Many times they have a lot of teeth missing. That's one reason. And I just think it's a better photograph that for me. That's my opinion.
Fair answer. That's photographer's choice, right?
Exactly. I just want to get more of a mood and try and get them to emote more than just laughing or I hate the thumbs up and all those things. I'm a no for all that.
Right. So Amy wants to know, do you have any tips for traveling internationally with your camera gear or any tricks that you've maybe learned over the years for that?
Well, what I would say and what I do, and a lot of my traveling buddies don't, is try and travel as light as possible. I try and pare it down. I don't bring a million lenses. I try and, I take usually 2 bodies plus the infrared body. That's one of the reasons I got the Sony, because it's lighter. It's a much lighter camera and the lenses are lighter, it's smaller. And my advice is to travel as light as possible, but to take what you really feel you need. I don't usually bring a 400 millimeter lens with me. I'm almost never going to use it unless I'm doing, if I'm on a safari, but even then, sometimes I wouldn't. It's very hard to control. And obviously the Palouse, I needed it. And what I did was I rented it. There's a really great rental place. I can't think of the name right now, but I could send it later, but it's, they'll send it, like if you're traveling in the United States, you could have it sent to your hotel instead of sending it to your home, and then send it back to them from there. So I've done that. I'm trying to think, maybe, those lenses are so big, they take up everything. That 400 millimeter lens is enormous. Yeah. But, I'm a small person, so it's hard for me. I can't handhold it at all. So I do bring a tripod when I travel, though. I always bring a tripod.
Awesome.
And I always bring a laptop. You have to have that, and you need external hard drives too, to back up your work.
Awesome. And Jakai wants to know, what was the name of the program that you put your pictures through?
Oh, yeah. It's made by DxO, and it's called Nik, N-I-K.
N-I-K.
Okay. Oh, and the rental place is called borrowedlenses.com. Got
it. Excellent. Well, Nancy, again, I want to thank you so much for being here, for spending the last hour of your life with us. and
Thank you.
allowing us to spend the last hour with you on your travel. There goes my dog.
At least I'm not the only one.
No, we've all got animals over here. Jakai did say that if you ever need a caddy of sorts to, carry around gear or anything like that, he's more than willing to, volunteer and be your caddy and live some life in your shoes. So, Jakai, maybe this is a great way to connect with Nancy. Hit her up on her website. Maybe, you guys can plan something out.
Yeah. You could text me privately.
There you go. We're making connections over here. But Nancy, I want to thank you again for being here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Everybody who viewed in today, we really appreciate you being here. Hope that you got something out of this. This has been another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you next time.